teaching breaking, b-boying for over 16 years now, well, 15 years. And I actually got into teaching it by accident. I come from a background of gymnastics. I was a gymnast and I competed for Britain once. So I always, when I went in and trained, it was normal to warm up. It was normal to do the basics, to break things down. If you're learning a move, to actually learn a forward roll before you learn a front somersault, that kind of thing, blah, 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 which I'll talk about in a minute. But I trained as well as a dancer. So I did ballet and I went to college. So in my era, because I'm quite old, hip hop was something that we did. I lived through that. We did that as a, just with my friends, dancing, watching Top of the Pops, whatever, seeing certain things. And it wasn't something that was taught in schools, in colleges, in classrooms and that kind of stuff. So it was kind of my generation that we were making it up as we went along. We saw things on TV and we were like, okay. So I started, when I left college, I trained at London Studio Centre, so I did ballet, jazz, different types of jazz. Jazz is a big word. And when I left college, I met a guy called Temujin who taught me American jazz. So I did Lindy Hop and Charleston and all that kind of stuff. But all the time, I was still a hip hop head. I was still going through the whole hip hop things, Running Man, whatever we were doing at that time. Never did I think 10 or 15 years later I'd be teaching the Running Man in schools. That's not something that I thought would have happened. So when I started breaking in '98, which I found eventually, I wanted to do it for a long time, but I could never find anyone to teach me, and I kind of missed out on it in the '80s. So I found it in '98, funny enough, a class at Pineapple, randomly. A guy was teaching, the teacher had left, had not turned up, so they brought an American guy in called Ace. And he was like the first experience I had of actually somebody teaching me. I tried to get somebody to teach me breaking in the sort of early 90s, but they would just throw themselves on the floor and say, yeah, do it like this. And it was like, right, okay. Even though I was a bit of a ninja, I still found it hard. I used to throw myself around a lot. But just when I started breaking, I realized, okay, there's a lot here that's very similar to the whole gymnastics, the way I kind of learned gymnastics, but I was just learning it from sort of various people. In 2001, somebody asked me to teach a class for their dance company. It was actually Natasha Kamjani. I think some of you guys know her. She's here. She's not here today. But she said, oh, can you teach some of my groups some tricks? Because we want to do some tricks when we do commercial stuff and that. So I started teaching sort of like a little bit of the breaking that I knew and a few like gymnastics things here and there. It suddenly turned out to be this big breaking class. I don't know how it happened, but everyone was coming to this class. It was a Monday night at Erdan, and like it was just suddenly this breakdance class, b-boy class, breaking class. And it was like, okay. So I suddenly started to have to think about, how do I break down these movements? You know, if someone comes into me and says, I want to learn a head spin. Okay, just get in your head and spin, innit? And that's the mentality that some people have. You know, you can do that. Some people can do that. But how do I break it down in order for somebody to learn that and to learn it safely? You know, don't get me wrong, it's inevitable. We're all going to have injuries. I've had a lot of injuries. My body, I was not born with the right body to do gymnastics, to do breaking. I'm too tall. My joints dislocate a lot. I've had a lot of dislocations in my life. I had to work in certain ways in order to continue what I do. I'm 45 years old and I'm still spinning on my head and I'm still doing footwork. I've had operations on my knees, but for some reason my knees still let me do it. And it could be because of the way I've broken things down in the past and the way I treat my body. People laugh at me because I lie on my back on the floor. I lie on my back on the floor. I do some weird exercise. I worked with a group in 2004 from Philadelphia, 22-year-old guys, breakers, lockers, poppers. amazing dancers, and so I had to like work with them. And we used to go in the studio. Okay, let's warm up. Their warm up was kind of a bit of top rock, whatever. I'd be lying on my back on the floor or kind of in some weird positions, but I had to do that for my body in order for me to do what I'm gonna do later. But so my dilemma is when I'm teaching, I always try and break things down. But how do I make that interesting, not only for young people but for older people? How do I make that more interesting? Because when you speak to some people, like some young people, it's like, right, you've got to warm up. They don't want to warm up. They just want to kind of throw themselves into it. So I've always tried to structure my classes in a certain way. For example, when I do the first part of warm-up, I try to do an aerobic warm-up, but I'm not just doing jumping jacks. I'm actually incorporating the movements and the names of the steps. So I'm shouting out the names of the steps as we're doing it. So for example, if I'm doing a warm-up in top rock, I'll start quite slow and I'll get the groove, and then I'll step it up, step it up, step it up. A bit like an aerobic class, yeah, but I'm actually teaching the moves as I go along. So I'm teaching the top rock steps as I go along. So even teaching here at UEL, I remember we had a sort of talk afterwards, a look back at the whole year, and I said, why do you think we do that warm-up? And they were still saying, yeah, we always have to do that warm-up at the beginning. But I had to explain to them, like, you're actually learning all the top rock steps. You're not only getting stamina, but you're getting an aerobic warm-up at the same time. And it's a repetition, so you're starting to learn those movements even in your warm-up. And this is something, I probably take this for granted. We probably take this for granted when we're teaching, but I was thinking about it and I was thinking, it's actually, that's over the years. I've structured that, I've let it happen over the years. It's taken time. Then from then, I think about mobilization. So mobilization is something that you do in a fitness class. How do I make that mobilization relate to what I'm about to teach? So if I'm teaching b-boying, if I'm teaching locking, I might do a head, like if I'm just doing my head like this. In locking, we look. That's what you do. So I might make them do it like that. So I'm actually doing the movements, but we're mobilizing at the same time. So I'm incorporating that. For example, if you're doing your rib cage, yeah, in breaking, we do this movement a lot. So you're concaved here, you're contracted. So it's all that kind of stuff, but you're mobilizing at the same time. So I live this life. I'm always thinking about how am I going to break down these movements? How am I going to make this also not interesting for younger kids as well? So I try to give all these things names and stuff like that. But still, I'm struggling trying to get my 16-year-old crew to warm up because they still don't want to warm up. So my sort of thing to guys is how are we going to get this sort of structure to our young people and get them to warm up? Because I know it worked for me, but how are we going to do that as a teacher for our young people? Sorry, I've talked too much. Thank you.
That is the million-dollar question, and hopefully we'll have an answer for you by the end of this session. So go, chat.